Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Type 35 build. And oh boy, is today one of those high watermark days. Sitting in front of me is a full-fledged, real-life chassis. We're talking rails and cross members and suspension mounting points, oh my. I know there's some irony to being so excited over a milestone that is actually just the starting point of most projects, and that this is in fact just a bare chassis, but it's just that. It's a chassis, and until recently, it didn't exist, and now it does. And that's pretty cool. Making something in your mind become a reality, all the choices and, well, this would be cool kinds of decisions, like the front spring hanger, which I still think is just an awesome piece. But now it's backed by a 2x2 120 wall square tube crossmember. Type 35s originally had a crossmember here, so this isn't groundbreaking, but being square tube versus the original round tube was a deliberate decision. Since the point of the crossmember is to tie the front of the rails together and relegate the foremost crossmember to spring location rather than chassis support, I thought the increased vertical web thickness of the square tube over the round would provide for more strength and less torsional bending. And in the end, it'll be covered by a front apron, so being square tube doesn't detract from the vehicle's appearance. Unlike the forwardmost crossmember, which is hung out in the wind for everyone to see, so you do kind of want it to look as nice as you can make it. But even just being square tube, I think it came out nice and it'll get the job done perfectly fine. In the middle of the car, however, the cross members are round. All three of them are 1¼ inches in diameter, 120 wall tubing to be precise. They're welded to the bottom of the frame rails on each side and have been spaced apart to suit each tube's specific role, as all three of the tubes serve multiple duties within the chassis. And mounting them to the bottom of the frame rails like this came out looking pretty snazzy. They were bent on a 5-inch radius, which is the exact distance between the bottom of the rails and the bottom of the car, which is just serendipitous. The two back cross members support the most items and, as a pair, will serve as the attachment points for the transmission tunnel. The rear bar will also hold the inner seat belt mounting points as well, while the middle bar will play the role of the transmission mounting cross member. The seats will also be positioned over the two of them, and all three will serve as mounting points for the car's floorboards, which will pass underneath them in a belly pan fashion. But I'll have to wait and see how much under-seat room there'll be to know if I'll be able to install under-seat storage, which would be pretty cool. The forward of the three cross members has been positioned not only in the same place in the cockpit as the original was, but also such that it should serve as a heel kick to allow you to push yourself up off the seat to make getting out of the car easier. Plus, with it being attached at the bottom of the frame instead of running inside it, it should allow for a little more footroom. At the rear, though, since we've had square tube cross members and round tube cross members, what's left except flat plate cross members? Well, not really cross members themselves, as they plate over the actual rear cross member, but they exist to reinforce the chassis and to support the rear suspension mounts. They've already been drilled and welded and are just waiting for the hardware to be bolted up. I think the battery will also get mounted off of one of them, but I haven't decided if it'll sit on the top plate or hang off of the bottom one. The plates themselves have been welded around their perimeter, and they'll serve as a much cooler mounting platform than simply welding suspension tabs onto the sides of the frame rails. A cool detail is the forward corners of the plates, which were rounded off before being welded. Just one of those neat things you'll never get to see once the car is assembled. Not to be outdone though, the rear axle also had its day in the sun as well. Just a little bit of work to make it look like something less than a boat anchor. All the brackets for the coil spring mounts, the bump stops, and shock mounts that were previously cut off, they had their remaining welds ground smooth. And they came out looking quite good. The driver's rear control arm bracket still needs some attention as it sticks out quite a bit further back than the passenger side bracket from the factory. So I'll have to cut and re-weld it so they both match. But for now, I called it a day by hitting the housing with a wire wheel to knock off all the crustiness. Not a full-on prep and polish, but enough that the axle doesn't feel quite so bad sitting next to its shiny, bare metal chassis friend.